Hey guys, welcome back to another thrilling episode of Checkerboard Chat. I'm Blake Von Hagen, the sports editor. He's Will Backus, assistant sports editor. We're here with Corey Sanning and Noah Taylor. We're going to talk some Tennessee men's and women's basketball today. Alright guys, we'll just start things off. We'll talk about the Lady Vols. They're coming off a win. Men are coming off a loss. Lady Vols got that win at Missouri on Sunday. How big of a win is that for this team?
It's a pretty huge win. I mean, they picked up 2 wins in a row after suffering a 28-point loss to Mississippi State, so they've done a pretty good job of bouncing back. They swept Auburn on Thursday night, and then last night, which was Sunday, they beat Missouri on the road after losing to Missouri at home earlier. It's a huge win. It really put them back into the talks for the tournament. There was about a week or two span where they were really in danger of missing out. But Charlie Cream, who does bracketology for the women's hoops side on ESPN, talked about how that Missouri win was pretty much good enough to not necessarily solidify their spot in the NCAA tournament, but if they can close out with maybe 2 more wins, 1 or 2 more wins, then they've probably got a pretty comfortable spot.
Yeah, hard to disagree with Will there. Yeah, it's a win they needed. They went into that game on the ropes, had a really historic blowout loss against Mississippi State the week before. Like Will said, really ruined their tournament chances, but now they've got a chance here, back-to-back wins, and they've got a tough stretch coming up with South Carolina and Texas A&M. So they'll have a chance to boost their resume even more coming up, and then 2 winnable games to close the year. So future's a little bit brighter than it was last week.
Yeah, last week we were filming during that Mississippi State game. Neither of you guys, I don't think, predicted Tennessee to win that game, so congrats on that. You didn't say anything dumb. As far as the men, Tennessee lost to Kentucky on Saturday in Lexington. We were there for that game. They were outmatched the whole game, and it was pretty obvious from the get-go that Kentucky had more juice and they were bigger and stronger down low than Tennessee was in that game. So what does that game mean moving forward for this team?
Well, I mean, it's a game that they weren't favored going in, so a lot of people that are calling it an upset, I think, need to pump the brakes on that a little bit. Kentucky's a really good team. I mean, they're top 5 for a reason. Like the Vols, they got out-muscled. They were out. Kentucky was tougher. Tennessee was out-rebounded 39-26. You're not typically going on the road with numbers like that. But moving forward, I don't think this really affects their tournament chances much. I mean, maybe it could be the difference between a 1 and a 2 seed later on if they can't manage to pull off a win at LSU or beat Kentucky when they come to Knoxville. But overall, I think Tennessee fans are overreacting a little bit to this loss and the drop in the rankings.
Yeah, one of the main issues for me that I've seen with this Tennessee team lately has been Kyle Alexander.
Yeah.
Whether he's been in foul trouble for a lot of these games recently, so that's been prohibiting him from doing things on the court. But then also once he's out there, he's having a lot of trouble against these bigger post guys, and that showed a lot on Saturday. He was in some foul trouble again for part of that game, but he's being outmatched down low, and when he's not getting the ball really deep in the post, he's not really able to do much on offense. And then on defense, he's struggling rebounding the ball. Only had 3 rebounds against South Carolina, only had 3 rebounds against Kentucky, and Tennessee has to have him play better if they're going to win these games going forward. And then Grant Williams was another big problem on Saturday, not necessarily his offense, but the fact that he only got 4 shots. He was 3 of 4, but only taking 4 shots, that's not a winning recipe for Tennessee. And then Jordan Bowden and Lamonte Turner combined, I think they were 3 of 17 or something like that.
Monte was 0 of 7, I believe, from 3.
Yeah, so, I mean, those guys have got to play better. They played decent against South Carolina, but in these big games against Kentucky, you've got to shoot the ball well, you've got to play well down low, and Tennessee didn't really do anything too well, and Kentucky did enough to get the win, and that rep crowd obviously helped them out too.
Give them the juice.
Yeah, that certainly did. So for the Lady Vols moving forward, what do you guys think that win over Missouri kind of changes the outlook on the season? Does that change, their tournament chances? You mentioned Charlie Cream has them in the tournament now. They were out of the tournament. So what do they need to do in these last few games to make it into the tournament?
I mean, even being in the tournament now, they're one of the last 4 in, so they're still on the bubble. They've been considered a bubble team really since that 6-game losing streak, and up until Mississippi State, they were still considered in. But right now, they're one of the last 4 teams in, so it's not like they're securely in there. They're really going to have to close out the season with. You mentioned how they've got matchups against Texas A&M, South Carolina. Winning one of those games would definitely help. But if they can close out the season with 2 more wins, which they have 2 winnable games against Vanderbilt and Ole Miss, or two of the worst teams in the SEC. They already beat Vanderbilt in Nashville, and then they get Vanderbilt at home. So if they can close out with those 2 wins, I'd say that would probably be enough to get them in the tournament as of now, even if they lose to Texas A&M and South Carolina, as long as those losses aren't terrible blowout losses. And I'd say if they could pick up a win against Texas A&M or South Carolina, that would probably write their ticket to the tournament, just because I feel like they would have done enough to close out the season strong. They won't be a high seed at all, but I think they'll get in.
And the SEC tournament will provide a chance to win a few more games there as well.
Right.
Yeah, not a whole lot of room for error for them. 2 winnable games, 2 tough games. I think they have a chance against South Carolina. It's a home game. So, that's probably a hot take at this point.
It's bold, yeah.
But,
that's what we like here on
but-
Checkerboard Chat.
Playing Missouri yesterday, I thought, a rematch game was really emotional. Coming off, they had the Mississippi State loss, beat Auburn, but it did, they weren't perfect in either win, obviously. So, but I think if they stick with the formula they had yesterday, which is strong defense, they limited their turnovers, they were amazing crashing the boards on both ends of the floor. So I think they keep with that formula. They get a big win out of Texas A&M, South Carolina. They have to beat Vanderbilt and Ole Miss. Those are not 2 good teams. And then, win a couple in the SEC tournament. They don't have to win the whole thing, but win a couple there, and then, that's a strong close of the season.
Yeah.
I definitely think the win against Missouri probably proved that they can win in these big game situations, because I don't think either of us expected them to win.
No, yeah.
But the fact that they did, after losing to this team prior and maybe not being as confident, is probably a big sign that, they can win these games, and it kind of makes you question why they hadn't beforehand.
Yeah, and it shows that, facing the adversity, when we saw them lose they beat Auburn to open the SEC slate, and then I think Missouri was their first loss. And then, it all sprawled out of control there. They kind of righted the ship a little bit against LSU, Florida, Vanderbilt, albeit not great teams, but won. And then, but it's nice to see they get that bad loss at Mississippi State, and they didn't fall after that. They were able to come back with 2 wins, so that was pretty impressive.
And Will, you mentioned the Lady Vols beating Vanderbilt in Nashville. They got Vanderbilt coming up at home. On the men's side, Tennessee beat Vanderbilt in Nashville. That was the first game after they were ranked number 1. Barely won that game. Looked like might be a repeat of the 2008 season when they lost to Vanderbilt right after being ranked number 1. They get that win. Now they got Vanderbilt coming up this week, which Vanderbilt hasn't won an SEC game. So Vanderbilt's hungry for a win. You would think either that or they've kind of given up on the season. But they're a young team. Tennessee will have a chance to kind of fix some things that went wrong in that Kentucky game. That game is coming up this week. So what do you think Tennessee needs to do in that game to kind of get back on the right track?
Well, how far we've come when we're talking about what the Lady Vols need to stick to a formula. The men's need to get back to their formula of winning, which is getting the ball down low. Kyle Alexander needs to be aggressive on the boards. He needs to be aggressive on offense. Grant Williams needs to take more than 4 shots. Play inside out. They have to, and plus they have to communicate on defense. Kentucky didn't light it up from beyond the 3-point line. You had Keldon Johnson, who had a hot stretch there to start. They only ended up, I think, 5 of 13 from that distance. So, if you really think, you have to boil it down to Tennessee has to just get back to their formula for winning games, which is getting the ball inside, letting Grant go to work. Kyle Alexander has to find some sort of way to stay out of foul trouble because he's been relatively ineffective, like Rick Barnes said, for the past 3 weeks. They're at their best when he plays the best, and he's going to have to try to find a way to get back to that on Tuesday. Thankfully, they have the worst team in the SEC to try to rebound from this loss on before they head to LSU, which is obviously another big
that'll be a huge
matchup.
game. We've talked about Kyle Alexander a lot, but one thing I found interesting that Rick Barnes said at his press conference today was that Kyle Alexander is going into games, he's not playing aggressively. He's playing like he's been in this foul trouble in the last few weeks, and he's playing like he wants to stay out of foul trouble to start
Sometimes
games.
plays scared.
Yeah, he is playing timid on defense, and that's something, when you get late into a game, players that have 3 or 4 fouls, they'll play, kind of soft defense. That's been his problem, but it's been starting games, and so he's going to have to play more aggressive at the beginning of games. And if you play good defense, you can be aggressive and play good defense and not pick up fouls.
Yeah.
And obviously as a big guy,
to start the season.
right? And obviously as a big guy, you're more likely to get fouls called on you when a smaller guy's coming up. But if he plays good defense, then that'll be better than him playing timid and not wanting to pick up fouls at the beginning of a game. So for the Lady Vols, what do you guys think is the key to finishing the season strong? You talked about their chances of making the tournament. What's the key to making that happen?
You could talk about Avina Westbrook and Renaya Davis, who are really their 2 pillar players, but I'd say they need better play from their bench. That's something they haven't had consistently all year, but they've had bench players that have had standout performances, but I think they need to get consistently better play from their bench because they're not a deep team. Outside of their starters, they've only got 4 bench players, and Kamara Harris doesn't get a lot of minutes, so they really only have 3 bench players that play a significant amount of minutes. All 3 are freshmen, so you could kind of blame it on that, but they need better performances. Like Mimi Collins against Missouri had 11 points, and she was pretty pivotal because she hit a 3 to put them up 58-56 with about 3 minutes left. they need stuff like that more consistently. I know they're bench players and they're freshmen, but they definitely need them to play better moving forward because you can't always rely on Avina Westbrook and Renaya Davis and your starting five, because when they don't perform, then who's there to pick up the slack?
Yeah, I'd agree with that about the bench players, obviously, because it's such a young team. So you got to have more than one player that has a breakout game every now and then. But if you mentioned Avina Westbrook and Renaya Davis, there's got to be somebody else on the floor that starts that can take over that load. And Zay Green did it, I think. I was writing about that earlier. Had 25 points against Auburn. And I think Avina Westbrook had like 6 in that game. So you're going to need more performances out of them like that, because you can't rely on the same 2 players or one player, because you had that stretch where Renaya Davis was struggling. And then you just had Avina Westbrook. So more consistency out of the players who were on the floor all the time.
And I think we're seeing that. Zay Green has really kind of ticked up her performances here recently. She's finished in double-digit figures in quite a few games. 25 points against Auburn. She was really electric in that game. And then Sheridan Green, she's been kind of quietly one of the more consistent players in this team. She's had a ridiculous amount of games where she's gotten double-digit rebounds in the past weeks. I think it's something like 9 out of the last 11 where she's had double-digit boards. And she had a double-double against Auburn. I think she had 16 points and 11 rebounds, something like that.
Yeah.
So players like that who they're kind of hitting their stride at the right time, but they need to keep that going because you can't always lean on Avina Westbrook and Renaya Davis.
Yeah, and actually, funny you mentioned Sheridan Green, because that's actually been a bright spot as the post. It's been really good the last few weeks, I think. So if they can keep that up, that would go a long way.
Talk about the bench, that's something that Rick Barnes mentioned for the men's team today. Basically play with a 6-man rotation against Kentucky. And that's not going to work in these big games. You got to have production from guys like John Fulkerson, guys like Derek Walker. Eve Pons, he's coming back from that injury, or he's wearing the mask now. Everybody's all happy about the mask.
Yeah,
for whatever
mask
reason. It'd be cooler if it was a black mask. I always think those look cooler. But those guys have got to produce off the bench, or otherwise Tennessee, playing with six guys, it's going to work in some games, but in these games like Kentucky, who rotated a lot of guys in and out, you're going to have fresh guys in there in Tennessee. That really hurt Tennessee, I think, on Saturday.
It's almost like playing one-dimensional in football. If you only have 5-6 guys that are going to come in and do their job against a top 5 team, you're not going to have much success. And we saw that on Saturday. Tennessee didn't get hardly any contributions from John Fulkerson. Like you said, they basically played with a 6-man rotation. Eve Pons hasn't played many minutes. I believe it's under 10, 15 combined total so far since he's been back. But I think like I said, they'll get after it in practice. Rick Barnes is a tough guy to try to get, when it comes to correcting issues, he's going to take that challenge head on. And I think in practice this week, they're just going to have to work on that, confidence. I think getting a swift kick in the behind like they did on Saturday should wake a lot of them up, and we'll definitely see how that plan plays out tomorrow night.
Yeah, I think Pons played 3 minutes against South Carolina and 6 minutes against Kentucky. So yeah, less than 10 minutes combined. Certainly something they need to improve on going forward. I think he can be a big factor, not offensively, but his defense is something that they want to see. You guys have anything else to add on the Lady Vols before we wrap things up?
Not that I can think of.
I heard Corey mention football. Did you guys watch the AAF this weekend?
I refuse to watch.
We refuse to watch the Memphis Express.
That's probably not a bad idea.
Give me a good reason why I should watch the AAF.
It's football in February.
There's college basketball in February, though.
Yeah, but you get the best of both worlds. Unless you're watching Memphis Express. You might want to stick with somebody else.
I was a big Memphis Express fan, if you can't tell.
Lifelong. Yeah, I've been there from the beginning, and it's been a tough 2-game stretch, but
Tennessee football starts soon, so you don't want to
You're there for the worst stretch in team history.
That's true. Yeah, I can tell my kids that one day, which won't be that long. So
always tell good stories.
Yeah. All right. Well, before we go completely off the rails, we'll wrap things up with that. The men's and women's team will both be in action this week. Where are the Lady Vols playing this week?
They're at Texas A&M.
Okay. So the men will be at home, and then at LSU on Saturday. I'll be there for both of those games. Corey will be there for the game against Vanderbilt. So we'll have plenty of coverage from all of those games this week. Once again, thanks for watching.